Hey everyone, welcome to the rollout. I'm Lindsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome.
Okay, well, we have the very first episode of The Last of Us out on HBO Max. And I don't know about you, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Uh we were because last week we talked about we were a little wary about flashbacks and the use of flashbacks, but I feel like it was effectively used in this situation.
Yes. So so I personally loved it. It stayed incredibly true to the source material and it
Yes.
also added on to it as well. I get a little worried about when things adapting video games get like so close to what is so close to the game itself because you go through scenarios and events in the
Yeah.
game, in the movie, or the TV show, and it just doesn't work because it's like either the tutorial period and it's just like
Right.
busy work and stuff. Like in the first Tomb Raider film with Angelina Jolie, there is like this very odd like tutorial sort of opening scene where she's fighting a robot in
I remember
her
that.
home. Yeah, like an armored robot
Yep.
shooting live rounds at her in her home, in which because in the video game, you do a tutorial period, like, in her home,
Yeah.
and she has, like, this crazy home gym where it's just, like, this crazy incredible obstacle course that has, like, a 2 minute and, like, you could pretty much die at any point,
Right.
and they put that in the movie,
They did.
which
And
was
wasn't she wearing pajamas, like silk pajamas?
Um, that's
Am I?
also in the movie,
Yeah.
but that's when it's like that's like at the halfway
Oh,
point
that's
where
the all
she's
right. Sorry.
doing bungee jumping,
Bungee jumping,
like
which
this
was set up in her home.
right, this weird bungee jumping setup in her living room, of which there's also a shootout.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I
Yes.
really loved that they took the essence of it. I mean, we really got the relationship between Joel and Sarah was just like heartbreaking. I loved the little intro, the little news
Mhm.
clip at the beginning that was like, it's not going to be,
With John Hannah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And they're like, it's going to be a fungus. And then when they
Yeah.
see grandma with it first emerging, but I
Oh
have to
my
say, the,
god.
the details, and again, we talk about like not over adapting and under adapting. I think that they brought in the game elements really well. Like when he pulls up the floorboard and pulls out essentially his starting equipment. He's got the crowbar, he's got the axe, he's got the flashlight.
Right.
And the other way is how they're using cameras. They actually, okay, I'm going to say they stole this from Last of Us 2, but at the beginning, when they're driving out of town and they're driving all over the grass in the car and then running over people, that was like the camera angles and the POV on the camera was almost exactly like the car chase scene. I say car chase, but like the car scene in Last of Us 2 when Ellie learns how to drive and they're just mowing the POV of the camera. I had to pull up the
Right.
clip on YouTube because I was like, this is uncanny. And I was like, yep, same POV. So little things like that, I think, are like good nods to the game without it being like, this is how you drive a car tutorial, you know?
Right, because in the opening of the original The Last of Us, you, play as Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
and so the POV in the car is as Sarah, and so you're basically very helpless just sitting in a car, not being able to do anything, and you're in the back seat, and, you can look, like, 360 degrees around, like, out the windows
Right.
and stuff, but you are essentially just trapped in the car, and then the dialogue is pretty much exactly like one to one where they come across the family on the side of the road and Tommy wants to stop and Joel's like another
Right. It's
person
like,
will come
no,
along and like we
like
got
he
to
has a
keep
kid.
going.
We have a kid.
We have a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much verbatim word to word, word for word. And it's really cool and god that scene, I mean obviously we're getting into spoilers,
Yeah. So please,
but
if you haven't watched it, stop now.
stop, yeah. Go watch it and come back.
Yeah.
So the part with the old lady,
Yes.
that disturbed the fuck out of me.
When she's like picking the movie and the old lady's just like twitching in
Just
the
like,
background, I was like, and she's out of focus too. And I was like,
and it's
this
such
is
a
so
little,
effective.
yeah, that's such a nice little, like little hint and piece of how it just slowly like drip feeds you what's going on and what's happening
Right.
throughout the beginning of the show, like how the zombie apocalypse, or the cordyceps disease is starting
Cordyceps.
to
Yeah.
spread. I do like that they also mentioned that they like took the woman into town a lot,
To
like
go to the
into the
hospital.
hospital.
Hmm.
And so like that really makes sense, and it is nice because in the game you just see the neighbors stumbling through the yard going all batshit, and Joel is like, basically like get away from the windows, that sort of thing. And
Right.
so that's the first time that you see an actual cordyceps infected person.
Right.
Whereas this one, it's just like, it's very nail biting. Like, even though I know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
that was still such a surprise to
Yeah.
just to see that, like, in the background, that
Mm, mm, mm.
you're like, oh, oh God.
Yeah.
There's just something so viscerally disgusting about the cordyceps disease
Oh my gosh. Yes.
that, yeah. And the mouth, oh no,
When it
God.
the tentacles come out,
Oh,
I what is
fuck
it about
no.
things protruding from the I'm trying to think of other movies where this has happened from, and I've hated it every single time.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's the little growths coming out of her, the fungi coming out of her mouth like tentacles, and oh God. Oh, it's so nasty because like you don't get that much detail in the game.
No.
Um where because you're not going to be able to do, like, especially when The Last of Us came out, they couldn't do like all that really fine detail work.
Right.
And I think that was a nice addition to what we know about the monsters, is that it starts in the brain, and it
Right.
starts in the head, and then that is it, especially since they go and they that's the main way that people get infected, is to get bitten, that it
Right.
actually shows that it starts in the mouth. And oh, the plane scene, that was
Yeah.
knuckle clenching. Like I was going like, I'm like this in my
Yeah.
house. I'm like, no, no, no. Because God, and because it can only end one way, because you're like, oh, there's a plane that they show. I know it's gonna happen to
Yep. We
that
know
plane, but
exactly
it's
what's
just
gonna
like,
happen.
when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? And you're just like, the setup and the payoff of that is just so like nerve-wracking and gut-punchingly awful, because you
Yeah.
see it and you're like, oh, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then it happens and you're like, oh God, it's really, really bad.
Yeah. And I think, I was really wondering, going back to that opening scene, I was really wondering, besides the amazing actors who were in it, why they included that. And I was thinking about, a lot of other kind of post-apocalyptic zombie whatever type shows, and a big part of the plot point is them like trying to figure out what this is and where this came cut from and how could this happen.
Mhm.
And the fact that they included an interview from 1968 where one,
Yeah,
they tell the viewer exactly what this virus is, so we don't have to spend time in the show explaining it. Like he
yeah,
also, the other thing I really liked is that, so much about zombie apocalypse shows or movies is, oh well, it's still fantasy, it can't really happen. The way they explained that in the first 5 minutes, I was like, global warming, human body temperatures changing, okay, this actually could happen. So like in the back of my head as you're
exactly.
watching this, I'm
Right.
like, this is a possibility now. This could almost happen, and it prevents them, because I was watching Van Helsing recently, and a big chunk of that is them like taking an entire season to explain how the virus works and blah
Mhm.
blah 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 blah. Whereas this, it's just like, okay, we dive right into the action. We know what's going
Right.
on. Yes, the mystery now is, how is Ellie going to be the cure? So we don't have to waste exposition on how this fungus happened, which I thought was a really smart way to do it.
Yes. because like we said in the last episode, the game is so tightly knit together.
Yeah,
Each story, each level, and each moment in each level is a story beat that furthers the narrative of the story. And so it's so tightly knit that you barely have any moments where you're like truly just like doing the first person shooter thing and like clearing levels and stuff without there being some type of purpose or story or like little moment happening that furthers the narrative
right.
or the character development or their relationships with one another. And I think that you're right about having that little block in of like what is it, like maybe 5 minutes in the beginning
Yeah,
with John Hannah
right.
just being like, let me tell you about this really scary fucking thing that could happen. um and yeah, I'm sure it's all based in like pseudoscience so that they could just like
Right.
make the connections. They're just like, okay, we're gonna take something, we're gonna take global warming, we're gonna take, this creepy thing that actually exists that
Yeah.
like
The fungus that he was explaining.
yeah, that thing actually does exist, and it is absolutely terrifying to think about that even on like a micro level of existing
Yeah,
somewhere out there. Uh, and we're gonna make these connections, and this is how it's gonna go.
right.
Um, I second half of the game, because the first half of the game is them setting up uh Joel's backstory with Sarah and why he's such a cantankerous old fuck when you start playing him in the future.
Right.
And the once you start the future, or the present day storyline, that's when you get the tutorial.
Right.
That's when you get the Lara Croft shooting at a like giant mecha
Yeah.
robot in her living room tutorial. And they went through it flawlessly.
Yep.
There were points where it was so close to the game that it was almost a little distracting. I have to say and this is just me because maybe like for other people it wasn't that distracting, but I played the game over and over and over again. Like
Yeah.
I played that game a million times on hard mode, and so I know everything that happens, and I know when
Right.
it happens, and I know how it happens, like beat for beat, for minute,
Right.
for second. So I was just like, oh, this is exactly like the game. This is exactly like the game. It's the same dialogue. It's the same like this,
Well, I
that, the
mean,
other
it's the
thing.
creator of the game working on it. And it's
Right.
like, well, if you already have content that's solid gold,
It's
why
not a
fuck with it
criticism.
if you don't
Yeah.
have to?
Yeah. It's not at all a
No,
criticism
no, no. But
because
I
I
get what you're
also,
saying because you're getting like, I don't want to say deja vu, but that whole
yeah,
like,
it's
oh, I've,
similar.
yeah,
It's very similar to deja vu where you're like, "Oh."
right.
Like, it's the same but different. Um, Speaking of the same but different, the casting, amazing.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
they did so well with the casting on all of it, and I just your heart breaks when Sarah dies,
Oh my gosh. You really do. And,
and
and
Joel is
when Joel has the flashback scene of her death right before he kills the one soldier, who's threatening them and Ellie, and you're just like,
right.
I mean, it's like we could have, I will say we didn't need that flashback scene, but it was a good reminder of like, oh
It was
yeah, this
poignant.
guy, he's done dealings with this guy, but at the end of the day, he blames y'all for his daughter's death.
Right. It's poignant, but I also think that it really starts to set up the Joel Ellie relationship,
Yeah,
because that's the first moment that he actually does something like major to protect her
right.
and to like step into that role of, parent, father figure,
Yep.
parent sort of. So I think that that was really well done.
Yes.
And I I kind of like how, because they had to end the episode, and how they like how Ellie just like offhandedly like mentions about her scar, and she's just like explaining away. She's like, it's fine, it's nothing, it's like 2 weeks,
It's
and
good. You can see it's healed.
yeah, and then they just like run off. Like I like that. I also like the next episode is obviously they're gonna take like a beat, a moment to like talk about it and
Yeah. Like,
have her
remember that
explain
thing you're
it.
not supposed to tell anyone? You're now going to have to tell them.
Right. Well, also it's not a for the episode 1 where they ended it, it was definitely not a good time for them to have that story beat
No.
and that like
Mm,
quiet moment to explain what's going on.
yeah.
Uh because they're in this very tense situation that they have
Right.
to like just keep moving and get out of. Like that part of the game is also one of those things. It's also one of the moments where you have to do like a billion stealth checks throughout getting out into the big city.
Right.
And so it's like, this is not the time nor the place. But yeah, I think that story moment was really nice. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that a lot. The stuff that they added, I think also served to tie it together and it didn't feel like filler.
It
Like
really didn't.
when you first get to the compound in Boston and they're bringing in that wandering child
Yes.
and God, it really sets up how like cold and um unfeeling that this new world has become and just like how the government is just so clinical about how they do things. Like it's showing on the one hand because they're like, "We're gonna get you," like, they basically explain that they're gonna, like, give her a last meal of
Yeah.
sorts
And you're going to
and
go to heaven where all the toys are.
right, and make things as comfortable for her as possible without telling her that they're going to just but at the same time, it's like this is the world that they have to live in
Right.
and to a certain extent like yes they have to do these types of things like how do you deal with somebody who is dangerous because of what is because they have this ravaging disease but also treat them with like a modicum of humanity
Right.
and having to do all of that having to do the hard, mean, cruel thing of having to, off somebody essentially who is a dead walking dead person
Yeah.
anyway is going to change the rules of society and how people,
Yeah.
interact in it. You get to really see how cold and
Well,
how hard these soldiers are on just regular day folk.
and then one of the first things we see when we go into the quarantine zone is the execution, the
Yes.
gallows. And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh shit,
True.
we are in martial law now." And it's like, what was their crime? Trying to get out of the quarantine zone. And it's like, "Okay."
Right.
I think that alone and they just have the PA announcer kind of you can kind of hear what she's saying like, "Okay, they, went outside the
Mhm.
quarantine zone." But they didn't linger on it, but that was just a really good way before even having anyone talk to just see that and be like, okay, I
With the
understand the world in which we are now. Great. And just that one image was just and again, they're doing a testament to this coming from a video game. They're doing so much with the cinematography um that you're able to tell the story even without the dialogue. And then on top of that, you're layering in fantastic writing and acting. But I feel like they have made such an effective use of the cinematography, the editing, the camera angles, all of that, so you are visually telling a story and then everything else just supplements it. It's not one at the expense of another.
right. It's it's not Rings of Power,
Yeah.
which super leans heavily into the costuming and the props and
Yep.
the
Yeah.
cinematography and all of that, the music to just try and rope you into
Oh
a paper
man.
thin plot.
And I
Um,
will say before the even father daughter moment, I think the other moment that the game sets up kind of like what this relationship is going to be between Ellie and Joel is when he and her are just hanging out in his room. And
yeah,
she's like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to sleep." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know, figure it out." And then, she, throws the joke at him about figuring out what the radio clues are, because it's like as the game goes
Yeah.
on, that is the like they it is a father-daughter relationship, but and what's her name does such an amazing portrayal of Ellie, that it's got that level of like the sarcasm and the jibing. So it's not the same relationship he had with Sarah, which I think is really important to show that Ellie is a very different person than Sarah.
Yes. They're very much two different people, and I really enjoy that you were able to spend a little bit more time with Sarah,
Yeah.
rather than having her be a plot device
Yeah.
at the beginning.
And explaining the watch away was a really sweet little addition as well. You know,
Yeah.
like that was the last thing he gave her, because she just absentmindedly is like, oh, your watch doesn't work. And he doesn't even have to say anything. And as an audience, I was like, oh, because she got it fixed and that was his birthday and that's when she died. And yeah,
Yeah.
Bella
I
Ramsey, there it is. Sorry, I'm the worst with names.
I also believe they came out as non-binary.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay, I apologize
I
then.
I believe so. I think this was like very, very recent, like within the past week or the past like couple of days or something.
Okay.
Uh, so we will be referring to Bella as
Yep.
they,
You are
because that
absolutely
is
right. I will change it. Thank you so much. See, it's been a long week. I have not
it's I
kept
have
up on
been
all the news.
I have been off my feed this week. I actually just drove home from work with a flat tire, so it's been interesting. But yes, I absolutely adore Pedro Pascal's Joel, and I don't think we really had to worry about him playing a protective, like, but also like cold shoulder dad.
I mean,
That's what he does
I will
best.
say I haven't looked forward to a show this much since probably his other show, The Mandalorian. But I will say,
Right,
obviously, the difference with The Mandalorian is that one, you can't see his face for most of this.
right.
And Pedro Pascal is such an emotive actor. And two, he obviously has very limited dialogue.
Limited
And
dialogue. And
the way his character moves is very stoic. So yes, it's a similar storyline, protecting quote unquote a child. Um, but I feel like the Mandalorian is more of this, I can't even say like mentor, because you know he's not force sensitive, but it feels more like a mentor mentee sort of relationship as opposed to a father daughter, father child relationship.
right, and also it's a little bit like there's love there, but there's also a disconnect because the
Yeah,
baby Yoda Grogu is literally a baby. And Bella's character, Ellie, is not a baby. She can have full conversations, and she has a like very like a multifaceted personality.
very
And
robust,
she
good at swearing, very effective use of swearing.
Yes, and she's also not as helpless as Grogu, obviously, because she's not a baby. She actually can fight and, stand up for herself and think through things, um,
Yeah,
and get out of certain situations. But yes, it is similar only in the fact that he plays a um like a mentor mentee
right.
type relationship with his main on-screen whatchamacallit co-star.
Co-star. Yeah, yeah. But this one actually
So
talks and talks quite well.
I here's the thing is that and don't kill me, don't sue me. In The Mandalorian, I honestly think that anybody could play that role. Not anybody, but a whole number of people could
Yes.
play that role. And I am also thinking about actors who, do a lot of mocap work as well. Anybody who knows good movement and expressive movement
Yeah.
through or expressive acting through movement
Right.
could play that very, very well.
Mhm.
And but when you look at Joel, not everybody could play that
No.
character very well. There are very few people that I would trust with that character.
I absolutely agree. And it's interesting now that we've seen kind of, I mean, Pedro Pascal obviously has a massive resume at this point.
Right.
But you can see kind of like the cockiness of his character from Game of Thrones, and then the stoicness of his character from The Mandalorian, and
Right,
a
yeah,
lot
because The
of these
Mandalorian
other.
is very one-dimensional a lot of the
Yeah, I
times,
mean, we
like,
won't we
he
won't talk about Wonder Woman 1984. We'll forget that one ever existed.
oh my
That's fine.
god.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, it didn't happen. Oh, Jesus. It didn't
um,
happen for anybody.
but also, I mean, and for me, and I have to say, I don't know if this is a Disney thing, but the fact that Disney plucked Pedro Pascal and Diego Luna after they both starred in Narcos and then Narcos Mexico appropriately, I think might be something, because I have to say, for the two of them, their performances in Narcos and Narcos Mexico is some of the most brilliant acting I have ever seen. Diego Luna's is all in Spanish. But if nobody has seen, I mean, if you're just like, oh, The Mandalorian, I was like, no, please go watch Narcos. Understand that Pedro Pascal is a brilliant actor, and then go watch Narco Mexico and understand why Diego Luna was perfect for Rogue One and, all of that. But yes, it's just because he's had sort of these, high profile roles that are
Right.
limited in what the character's allowed to do. I think people sometimes forget about that. So now that we get to see Pedro just chew into this character, I just think the entire season is just going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Also, the zombies, the monsters, we were talking about that
Yes,
in our last
we
show.
did, wondering how they would. Obviously, we're still early on, that we're only
Yes.
seeing them kind of at the early stages of the transformation. But yeah.
How that guy threw himself through that kitchen. Wow. That restaurant kitchen will never be the same. Got lots of dented cupboards in there. I was very it's like watching that actually reminded me of watching The Kingdom a lot,
Yes.
where in The Kingdom, goddamn, whoever the stunt team is in The Kingdom, like I don't know how they're not going to be in iron lungs before the age of 30
I mean,
because they
sugar
just
glass, sugar glass.
throw well, well, they just throw themselves like around the woods and like into buildings and all sorts of
Yeah.
things, and the
I
way that they
am,
move and
yeah,
crawl
I'm
over.
very interested to know how much of this was physical performance, how much of it was mocapped and CGI'd, because it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I know, I mean, we both know performers who are character performers, and like my girl Andy, she can do all those crazy moves that grandma was doing. Did they hire a performer
yeah,
who could do that? I don't know. Was it VFX? That I would really love to know. Because the movement is so important in this game, because it's not your tradition, it's not a zombie apocalypse. Like, they are not slow
right,
moving. These characters are fast moving. As the fungus takes over them, they evolve or devolve, whatever, um into very identifiable type version, variations of the virus, or
right.
the fungus infection. And it's so iconic in the game, their movements, their sounds, that I think as we see the season go on, we're hopefully going to start seeing the progression of, this was the early infections, now here's all the later ones.
Right. I'm excited to see the clickers. Those are
Oh
the
man,
creepiest.
they
Mm,
are the creepiest.
oof.
Because I mean, what was, shoot, I'm trying to think, what was the movie? It was another movie that the character like bends and whatever, and then like ends up on all fours and like crawls towards you, and I'm just like, there's something terrifying about a human. I think it's because it's very feral, about a human
Yeah.
going on all fours with like crazy look in their face coming after you at full speed. I'm like, it's just, it's animalistic, and I think that makes it much more terrifying than your slow walking dead zombies.
Right. Well, and because it's doing the all fours run is not exactly like the most comfortable for a human.
No, they're not meant to
That's
be.
not the most natural way to do it, but sometimes I can't really get behind that, but with this show, I like when they were doing it, it's because they had like either tripped or they're on the ground. And so like the only thing that they can do, the quickest way to get to their prey is to like rather than like stand up from the ground is to just scurry and like scrape and
Yes.
pull yourself across the floor and just like get into that all fours running thing until they can actually get up onto their feet.
Right.
And so they're the desperation and the pure like single-mindedness of their hunger is
Yeah.
fantastic. I think they did with how little you actually see of the zombies, of the infected.
Mhm.
It's very impressive because it does
Yeah.
leave a very distinctive impression
Yeah.
of what they do and who or rather what they are.
Right. And I will say, thank you, IMDb. Looking up, so apparently the stunt coordinator is Guy Buse, and he worked on several of the Planet of the Apes movies.
Ooh, okay,
So,
there you
and
go.
for those, if anyone is not aware, those were mocapped performances.
Yes,
Terry Notary being the big name
beautifully
in
done.
yeah, so Terry Notary is a legend in the mocap community, but he is specifically known for his primate work. Like he actually invented
Mm,
these devices that you grab with your hands to get that primate walk.
my
So
friend
it's
has a
good to
pair of
know that,
those.
yes, this stunt team has an understanding of the importance
Movement
of this
and
movement. Yes.
that
So,
makes a lot of sense now that you looked it up. The
I mean,
code has been cracked.
apes, fungus infested people, it's all, no, it's all relative, but no.
I'm just saying because they did such
Yeah.
an amazing job for those movies, like, say what you
Yeah.
want about, like, the storylines of those movies, like, I actually don't mind
Performances.
I think they're
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah.
For what they are, I mean, it's a silly concept, and they honestly did very well with what they were given.
Yeah. I
But the
agree.
movement is just like, mwah, it's beautiful. And the way that Andy Serkis is allowed to just kind of let go and show his full range
Yeah.
is fantastic. I really appreciate that series for that specific, like that opportunity to see that type of
Absolutely.
acting specifically.
Yeah.
But yes, so that's episode one.
Yeah. And I
Clearly had
mean,
a good
they
impression.
came out with a bang. I am in. I am all in. I can't wait.
Yes.
We're gonna be here every week breaking down our thoughts. So of course, let us know your thoughts. But yeah, I have to say this is probably one of the best shows based on episode one, but one of the best shows I've seen in a while.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I just can't believe HBO is coming off of the second season of White Lotus and the first season of House of the Dragon.
Yep.
They're on fire.
They are
Good for them.
absolutely
Fuck it. Good for them, I
obviously they
guess.
got some money coming from somewhere.
I probably from all that hot D money.
Yeah, I know.
That's where
I'm
it's
not
coming
asking
from.
questions. But yes, HBO Max, please keep up the good work. I watch a ton of shows on HBO Max, so I'm very happy about that. Yeah, so uh, that's all we have for today.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're the rollout,
And we
and
will
we will geek with
speak
you
with you next
next week.
week. That's right.